Well, it's lovely to have you all here today. I'm really excited to talk about all things women in tech, talking about the landscape and I guess growth and changes and journeys that you've all experienced, and just addressing, I guess, what's changing and what's happening within the space of women in tech, women in cyber. So Abby, to kick things off, can you tell me a bit about your journey and your experiences to get to where you are today as a woman and leader in tech?
So I think it was very much not where I thought I was headed. Went to uni and did marketing, and came out the other side, and obviously didn't really know where to go, what my next steps were, what I was going to do. Ended up as an account manager in sales in IT, and realised how much I actually did enjoy it, and how much there is to learn. I think is the biggest thing, and realised I actually really enjoyed learning, which never expected me to say, kind of going back to when I was at school and everything else, just wasn't really there for it. So yeah, definitely not the path I initially thought I would go down, but wouldn't change it.
I feel like I should jump in there because I laughed. I was exactly the same, and I think you guys were too. Like, nobody ever thought they'd, well, I don't think any of the people I've spoken to, especially the women, thought they'd end up where they did. I went into teaching to begin with. I speak Spanish. I was teaching Spanish and French, and I have a little bit of French, but not enough to teach. But there was a lot of pressure on you to try and speak two languages.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, luckily for me, it was my army background that got me into this world, or got me into the government, and then I kind of switched from the government over to like the private sector, and yeah, I've just gone from there really. So yeah, but I just find it really funny. I nobody ever thinks, you know what, I'm going to go into this career in particular. I'm going to go into tech, because I think the problem as well, or not the problem, the challenge is that, well, it's not a challenge, it's a good thing. There are so many jobs in tech. I don't know where you look to start. And I remember, as a 5-year-old when I wanted to be a princess, I know, nobody said, well, why don't you go and look at threat intelligence, which is what I'm doing, or, going into cybersecurity and technology. It just wasn't on the horizon really, so.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm the same. Yeah. I didn't go to university. I left college at 18, had no idea what I wanted to do. Opened the local paper to have a look at job adverts, and there was a job advert in a local IT company for a receptionist, and I just thought, okay, I have no direction of where I want to go, what I want to do, so I'll get a job in an office for now. I get weekends off and bank holidays off, and I'll see where that takes me. And 10 years later, I'm still in the industry, but my training's all been on the job. Mm-hmm. None of it's been at university or outside of work. It's working for companies and working my way around different roles, different experience, and yeah, ended up here. So yeah, all different routes. What about you, Nicole?
My route wasn't exactly what I would call ideal, because I wanted to be a lawyer.
Really?
And we got to the college, and my stepdad said, these are your choices. You're going to do information technology, coding or programming, or you're going to do information technology, infrastructure and networking. And I was like, but I'd really like to be a lawyer. And he was like, no. So I chose coding, and I actually did pretty well at coding, surprisingly. And my first internship was in a secure operations center in a SOC. And that was my jump into the security world. And I was doing admin for certificates and SSL certificates and things like that. And then became a help desk techie for a few years, all within a security-based environment. And that's how I ended up staying in cyber. But my journey into it was kind of decided for me. Didn't really end up being a coder. And because of that, was given the ultimatum to move out, which I did by 18. And then, ended up in cyber somehow, and I've been doing that now for like 15 years, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, I think it really goes to show from listening to everyone's experiences that there isn't a straightforward route, and you don't necessarily have to, dream up this idea of being in cyber from a young age. It can grow within you, or it can be a route that you end up going down just due to circumstances in life. But yeah, no, really interesting. And what would you say is like the standout moment so far in your journey? What would you say has really stood out for you as a female in the industry?
When I think back, there's two major moments that were driven by other women in the industry. The first time was by a Serbian lady. She was my manager, Mira Andrić, and she told me, there's no longer a place for you in this company. Like, you need to move on, because you're just gonna not get any further.
Oh, in a good way.
In a good way.
See,
In a good way,
also.
as my boss said. Like, no. And she was like, you're done being a help desk technician.
Yeah.
And we were quite a small company, like 90 people. She's like, if you're trying to grow and become other things, you need to move on. She was the first woman that said, get out. And then the second woman was for an ISP I worked for in South Africa. And I was doing the usual techie type stuff. And she was like, I think you'd be really good as an architect, like a technical architect. And I'm like, no. And she said yes. And she's like, could you just try it out and see how you feel about it? And I went into the role, learned how to design stuff. I really enjoyed drawing things in Visio and designing networks. And she was the other woman that was like, sometimes you don't necessarily need to have the experience to jump into something. You can learn on the job, because we often try and wait till we have all the knowledge and the experience before applying for something. And she was like, no. Get into it, we need somebody. And I did, and it worked out pretty well. So I think those two women were the big leaps in my career, I would say.
Just jumping in there, they say that on average, if you apply for a job as a man and you have 5 of the 10 qualifications, or not qualifications, job lists in the job description, then the man will apply for it. But as a woman, a lot of the time we wouldn't apply for that because we've only got 5. I thought that was quite an interesting thing. But that leads me on to, so I also had 2 defining moments. One with the army and another with when I moved from the government to Bytes. And I can't tell you how nervous I was about moving over, like making that jump. It's really, really scary, isn't it? When you go from one job to another and you think, am I doing the right thing? For me, I'm a mum, I've got a 3-year-old, Arthur. He's brilliant, but everything I do is for him and to protect him and to, earn money to be able to support him. But I do really love my job as well, so I think I'm really lucky. But yeah, so that was one pivotal moment where I thought, my goodness, I'm going from an intelligence analyst in the government to a threat intelligence analyst. Like, what's the difference? Am I good enough for this? You doubt yourself all the time. It's like imposter syndrome is massive for us, isn't it? I know men get it too, but in particular for us as women, I think. And then the second moment was, I'd had Arthur, I had paid maternity leave with the army, which was amazing, and it's not unheard of anymore, but at the time it was really quite novel for reservists to get that. And then suddenly I was like, how am I going to do this around my job? And there's a lady, she's a major, she's Izzy Gilbert is her name, and she's an OC of 3MI, who's a reserve battalion down in London. And she just got me through. I was talking to her, and she was like, well, just because you're breastfeeding doesn't mean you can't go on a course. Just because you're doing this doesn't mean you can't go on a course. And suddenly taking away those barriers and having that person to speak to about everything was amazing. So I think that's what's kept me in the army as well, really, just having that moral support. And look, loads of women in the army now, it's all normal. We all are mums or females, and it's a solidarity. What about you guys, Abby or Lorna?
Yeah, so I think for me, there hasn't been 2 pivotal moments personally. It's been...
That's probably a good thing.
a mixture of kind of smaller things. I guess previous companies I've worked for, there wasn't necessarily that... There wasn't women as consultants. It just wasn't really heard of, wasn't seen. So for me, being in kind of a junior role, it wasn't then an aspiration because I couldn't see where...
Gosh, that's interesting.
It was a possibility, essentially.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until it was actually a friend of mine that kind of started to feed me more and more kind of technical information and saying, there is spaces for you to become a specialist in these sorts of areas. And obviously moving to Bytes, it was the pure amount of female consultants and female specialists. I mean, when I joined and saw the likes of Nicole, and you're like, okay, wow, she's a bit of a powerhouse and she knows what she wants and she's fantastic at what she does, and very much look up to her as an individual and as a peer that obviously works alongside at Bytes. So yeah, I mean, there have been a multitude of things that have kind of made me see the changes that are happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite similar to you, I feel like I'm still on my journey and finding my way in the industry, and because I just fell into it, I never really planned out my path or have looked back and reflected on where I've been and the journey that I've been on. But I think there's been lots of small moments which have influenced the decisions, you know, that I've made and the place that I am today. But I remember when I was probably about 6 months into working at Bytes, and I've been challenged a lot at Bytes in terms of situations I've been put in, like in good learning ways, in presenting and being in different situations that I've never done before, which has been terrifying, but then really rewarding. And after one event that I'd presented at, one of the really successful account managers at Bytes approached me and came up to me off their own back and just said, I want to say how well you did today and how fantastic it was to see a woman. You were the only woman presenting today, and it was so amazing to see you get up there and do it, and how fantastic you were. And I think that was really a moment where I felt, like you say, there's imposter syndrome. A lot of people feel it, but I definitely feel it. And it really felt like I knew why I was there that day, and I felt, you know, that I was meant to be doing what I was doing for a reason. So that was definitely a moment where a very successful woman in the industry kind of gave me as well that recognition, and it means a lot, I think, when you're recognised by anyone, but also other women who have paved the way in all different ways that we do.
There's definitely, I guess, a lot of changes and a lot of transformations within the female role within tech, and I think the transformation will continue for, you know, into the future for a much longer time. And I think those experiences will obviously alter and change, and maybe your viewpoints will change as well. How do you, I guess, envision, you know, the future of women in tech? How do you see that sort of shaping out?
I read a statistic the other day from the BBC which made me really upset, and it was the fact that women or girls who are just coming up to do the GCSEs are just not taking, there's actually a downward trend in them taking computer science. Really? And that to me is, I was then thinking, because I'm obviously an analyst, so I'm like, right, why is that? And, you know, the things I can think of is it's not cool, it's geeky. The perception of women in tech is that, you know, you have to be really, really technical and know all this technical stuff, and that makes you less able to, like, speak about everything else around that to, like, enable it to people. Why else would you think women don't want to be in tech? I appreciate I've just hijacked your question, Danny, sorry, but like that made me worried about the future.
I think the biggest thing that, and how I felt when I was at school, was massively that IT wasn't going to be for me because I didn't want to be a developer.
Yeah.
I didn't want to write code, I didn't want to do that side of things, but I think it's so important to, well, for everyone to know, not just necessarily for women, but for everyone to know that there are so many different jobs within the IT industry that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know my role existed until I was in this position. And there are just so many different things that you can do. You do not have to have experience actually creating anything on a PC to understand the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been technical. I'm still not technical. There's so many roles within the industry which are built on relationships and built on knowledge which is not from a technical perspective, and obviously we've got fantastic technical people within Bytes and within the industry, but my role is certainly not that, and it doesn't have to be. And I think in school, IT for me was literally just being on a computer and understanding how a computer worked, like word art and, you know, things like that. So I didn't understand what the possibilities and the roles were out there to be in this industry, and I don't think it was ever my dream to be in cybersecurity, but I'm really proud to be in it now. And I think one of the best things about it is almost on the flip side of what you were saying, Abby, where people are saying, oh, why am I talking to you? It's almost fun to, when you're speaking to people and saying, what do you do? Oh, I work in cybersecurity. You
Their
know,
reactions are always priceless.
I feel very proud. So it sounds fantastic. And all our roles are so different, our skills are so different, our experiences are so different, but working in that industry, I think is something to really be proud of.
I think there's like a stereotypical vision, I think like you touched on a bit, that that you have to be, you know, a techie, or you have to be obviously immersed into your computer or coding. And I think, it goes to show, obviously, you've all got very varying roles. And even with myself, being a marketing sort of professional, I'd never ever anticipated going into like the cybersecurity route. And obviously here I am, and it's something that I've been able to, almost fall in love with, and still continue on with what I love to do, which is marketing, but still be part of that world and still learn more about the cybersecurity world and what's happening within the landscape itself. And I learned that through obviously my peers, such as you guys, but also through through our partners and through what's online and those real sort of research feeders. So I think the roles are very varied. It shouldn't be seen anymore, or it's hard to, I guess, pull away from that stereotype. But I think we are moving in the right direction where we are seeing, different views and understandings around what there is within the cybersecurity space. I think it's definitely a gradual change of view, but I think it slowly is getting there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think awareness is growing. More and more people are talking about being in these roles. We're seeing more people out there. I follow a feed that just shows women who are entering interesting industries that are of diverse backgrounds, and you're just seeing more and more people end up being astronauts, end up being physicists, and all sorts of things. So I think awareness is growing, but I do think there's still some work to be done around talking to kids and making them aware of what's available and what the options are for them, showing them that being in cyber isn't necessarily geeky, or for somebody who's brilliant. I love it. Somebody who's got a hoodie on and all looking all dodgy. It's nothing like that.
My thoraxes would disagree, but
fair enough. So I think that awareness is still there. I also think we still have work to do in our businesses. I'm not necessarily of the perspective that we want to force quotas on companies, but there's got to be some active action to get things rolling and get people into STEM. Have companies also talking to schools to get them into STEM, and you are seeing companies speak to graduates, bring them in and try and support diversity in all sorts of environments. So overall I feel quite positive that there's work in the industry and things changing.
And that leads on nicely to my final sort of point and question, I guess, around if you were to give any sort of advice or guidance to a young person or a mature person looking to go into the world of cybersecurity, what would you say? What would you advise?
Don't be afraid. Be the first one. Don't be afraid to follow your dreams. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, like mentors. My mentor, Stuart, his name is. He's brilliant. He's an analyst too. He's got an intelligence background, but he's a bloke, obviously. And it doesn't matter who mentors you, as long as you're able to have that support and that network of support and help. There are loads of women in tech initiatives going around as well. So, things like that. Or for anyone who's a parent as well. I've just seen something on LinkedIn, which is the 5-hour working club, so it fits around your kids, which I think is a really novel idea. Because again, it's bringing in the fact that, I was really nervous when I had Arthur, that then suddenly that would be a blocker. Or if you have more children, that's a blocker on your career. So it's things like that. How do you get around that? And things like the 5-hour working day are a brilliant initiative. So I think we just need to keep driving all these new ideas and see, how we can, work from home, work flexibly, work around. So ask around was my second.
And I think the biggest change comes from obviously my family. They always make the joke that, and I'm sure you guys have this as well, as to you're basically Chandler from Friends. No one has any idea as to what you do, because as soon as you say IT, everyone switches off to an extent because they either think sales or technical. There's no in between. But as soon as you start to kind of explain to someone what your actual job is, the fact that you work with things that they use on an everyday basis, and they start to then understand and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I think it's kind of blurring that line a little bit with the people that are interested in moving to IT, whether you be younger, older, whatever, wherever you're at in your life, whatever you're trying to achieve, is understanding that actually it's not just a straight line that you either have to be technical or in sales to
Yeah.
to work in IT. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you touched on with schools as well for young kids, I think that's such an important movement to embrace, is going in and educating kids on the opportunities that are available and giving everyone the same opportunity to explore the industries that they are interested in and where they might want to take their career path later in life. Because I think a lot of it comes down to not understanding really what IT is or the opportunities and the careers involved in IT. And as you said, Ellen, I think just reaching out, there's probably a lot of people that you don't realise actually work in this industry that you know, and reach out to them and say, what do you do, or what are the different roles in your company, and just that education and
Education,
understanding what it's involved in.
I think for me, what was helpful throughout the years was finding these little communities of people. Sometimes there would be meetups in London, and you'd go there and you'd be like, oh, there's more of me, because I can't tell you how many times you've probably experienced this when you're at an event or at a meeting and you're literally the only woman in the room, and there's like 50 men in there, and
Or
you're
there's
like,
no women speakers. Like, it's like,
That
really
really
frustrates me. Sorry, Nicole.
no, that's
Like,
okay.
please
So I
represent.
think like finding communities where you have, you know, other people either in cyber or other women, so that you can get that support and mentorship. I think that's so important. That's been really helpful. Just a few people that you can, you know, talk to and rely on is really helpful. Nowadays, you could chat GPT a lot of it. Like, I'm thinking about going into cyber. Give me all of the options that are out there and tell me about them. That's another way you could see what's possible in the industry. But yeah, I think that communication piece is quite important.
Yeah, and I think also just giving an opportunity to actually dive into that industry, you know, it doesn't mean to say that you have to commit to it, but at least giving it a go and understanding it a bit more from your point of view, because as we've all discussed, everyone's got their own sort of points of views and sort of experiences. I think give it a go, see where it takes you, I guess. But yes, it was really lovely to sit down with you all. It was really interesting to hear everyone's experiences and thoughts, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us.